Lately, it seems every passing second brings news of another climate-driven disaster. But we still have the power to turn back the clock. Harnessing the power of collective human energy, today's university students are working together to chart a new future, demanding and creating the solutions for a sustainable climate. But we still have the power to turn back the clock.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to our next daily briefing for Campus Climate Corps. This is going to be I believe, our seventh day that we're going live. There's a lot to cover from the first week, and if you have missed any of those days, I suggest you go back and you take a look. We've definitely covered some of the shortfalls, some of the positives and benefits of the COP29 conference over here in Baku, Azerbaijan. The Campus Climate Corps team is still over here, and we still got you covered for our second week. In fact, a little bit of a brief overview of what's to be expected for week two is today was human development, children, youth, health, and education. Tomorrow is going to be food, agriculture, and water. On Wednesday, urbanization, transport, and tourism. On Thursday, nature and biodiversity, indigenous peoples, gender equality, oceans and coastal zones. And finally, the cherry on the parfait is the final negotiations that take place over at COP29 in Azerbaijan. So let's talk a little bit today about the human development, children and youth, health and education. We're going to start off, of course, by talking about the Baku Initiative on Human Development for Climate Resilience. This initiative is one in which addresses the causality and the nature between how high a country is on the Human Development Index, and also how little or how much their population are at risk for climate disasters. So essentially, this index is trying to showcase the relationship between higher HDI or Human Development Index and those communities that are less at risk for climate-driven disasters. Essentially, it says the more well-off you are and the more well-off nation, the less you're prone to climate risks and disasters. So this is essentially something that Baku is, or at least this COP29 is attempting to suggest that we need to input more into developing nations so that we can prevent, so that when climate disasters inevitably do hit them, they're more prepared to handle those disasters. Now, there were quite a few key attendees that were attending the initial pavilion where this was hosted, the Initiative on Human Development for Climate Resilience. Some of their core objectives were to promote sustainable policies which enhance human capacity and climate adaptation. There were a myriad number of topics discussed there, including the finance, education, and local action plans to improve resilience in those vulnerable communities. And essentially, they want every nation to adopt this the Human Development for Climate Resilience Index, in order to showcase or at least prove that climate financing is needed at every level, but most importantly in developing nations, because they are at risk. They're the most at risk for these climate disasters. Also, eco-literacy was a fairly large discussion today, especially in the Nazimi plenaries. Excuse me. This is essentially presented as a strategy to improve environmental awareness on all educational levels. So how do you discuss climate finance? How do you discuss anything taking place at COP with the average reader of a newspaper? Essentially, this is just trying to promote climate education into a formal curriculum. Now, how successful this is going to be when we're talking about 29 COPs after the initial protocols that took place in 1992, I believe. It's quite a long ways from that initial COP. There's also a university sustainability rating. So essentially, they're suggesting that we should be working with universities to help increase environmental awareness. They're proposing that we standardize a global rating system for universities based upon their sustainability efforts as well, and aim to encourage higher education institutions to adopt eco-friendly practices and reduce carbon footprints, and also help with this eco-literacy initiative on an academic level. There was also quite a bit of discussion today on decolonization. I attended at least 3 seminars that discussed how important it was to, in a post-colonial world, recognize that colonialism is still apparently a massive issue. And this, of course, addresses historical injustices and resource allocations in the 21st century, And it also suggested that we need to continuously be in a decolonization mindset, providing equitable solutions that take historical accounts into consideration, and also promote climate financing in previously colonized regions across the world. There are plenty of speakers, most notably speakers from the Congo, speakers from Cameroon also came and spoke. Quite a few folks. The outcome essentially was that there's a lot of perceived legacies of the colonial exploitation era, and it's important to address those when we are meeting with these high profile finance meetings. Now, interestingly enough, what's taking place at the same time as COP29 is the G20. The G20 is a meeting of most of the world's most high profile leaders it's actually taking place right now in Brazil, which is coincidentally where COP30 will be held next year. Haidar Aliyev has blasted the G20 summit earlier this morning and asks while these world leaders are stiffing the climate summit only to discuss climate change at the G20 summit. This includes the world leaders like Biden. It includes world leaders like Keir Starmer, that's also attending this event, and Emmanuel Macron. All three of those leaders have, interestingly, stiffed the conference of COP29 here in Baku, Azerbaijan. So Haidar Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan, has come out and been very vocal about his antagonism towards the G20 summit and the fact that he seriously considers COP29 to be a failure if the G20 summit does not come out and support the efforts here taking place in Baku. Now, this leads to another very interesting point about Article 6, because this has been a high topic of discussion today and also throughout the entirety of last week. In fact, one of the reasons why a lot of news media agencies consider COP29 to already have been a failure, especially during week one, was their failure to come together and talk about Article 6 and essentially how we're going to utilize that moving forward. Now, Article 6 is essentially about market incentives for combating climate change. So nations which are developed can actually, in their attempts to reduce their carbon, or essentially this is like a carbon trading system, where nations that are more developed, if they invent solutions to combat the climate crisis, they can sell those credits. That difference between how much carbon they've actually saved over time, they can sell those carbon credits to nations which have yet to adopt sustainable practices and reduce their overall carbon footprint. Now, one of the major issues with this is initially Article 6 of the Paris Agreement was written in, guess where? In Paris. Since Paris, it's almost 9 years, and many nations which are or were considered back then developing nations have entered into the developed stage or developed area. And this is causing a lot of contention because some of those nations who have turned from developing nations to developed nations still want to be considered developing nations and therefore qualify for financing under Article 6. They still want to be able to buy and sell credits as a developing nation, which means that they get access to more funding, more financing, as well as a special spot in deliberations as a developing nation. So the issue with Article 6 now is there has been no clear designation between what a nation would be considered as developing or developed in a post-Paris world by 9 years. So one of the initiatives by this guy, Haidar Aliyev, is to push for recognition of Article 6 and try to get it adopted internationally as this international standard the best way possible. Now, one of the United Nations report suggests that should Article 6 be adopted equally and fairly, it might save $250 billion annually in their climate action efforts moving forward. And so that's just pretty much that wraps up everything that happened today at COP29, at least as far as everything that's official is concerned. Now, however, I'm going to introduce to you a member of our team who actually had a rather interesting interview last week. And I'm going to actually bring him over now so he can introduce the topic. And I will also, assuming you know how to share something now when you're ready.
All right. Good evening, everyone. As always, it's an honor to be here speaking tonight. And as Rock just said, yeah, we had a very interesting interview with someone who is involved with nuclear. So nuclear energy can be a little bit controversial. And later in this broadcast, we will go over a little bit of that controversy. It was Both sides were expressed pretty vocally today at COP in the form of some demonstrations. And in fact, just this morning, we walked by a pro-nuclear demonstration, and then right into the next room, there was an anti-nuclear demonstration, and there were even more in the afternoon. So definitely a lot of opinions circulating around, a lot of intellectual diversity, as it may be. So we're going to go ahead and pull up this interview with Sebastian, and then we'll talk a little bit more after that.
Sorry about that, folks. We seem to have lost connection there for just a moment. Uh, we will resume the share now. All right, we are actually sorry about that, folks. It seems like our connection keeps getting booted while we're here. So um, we will try one more time. And if not, then we will just continue with the broadcast.
uh, Nuclear was going up. I mean, COP27 nuclear was just showing up first time. COP28 was going up really with
Go ahead and do your monologue then.
All right, folks. So apologies for that. We're having some tech issues on our end. So we're going to go ahead and skip the interview. But just to recap a little bit, nuclear energy is receiving a lot more attention nowadays, especially as the technology develops. A lot of progress is being made. And there's still quite a few concerns about it. Um, but something that needs to be accounted for, so something that really needs to be accounted for, is how we are getting to carbon zero, how we are maintaining all of these pledges of tripling renewables, of staying under 1.5 degrees Celsius change, a lot of things, and just mathematically to get there. A lot of other renewables like solar on their own simply can't accomplish that. It's a very unfortunate fact, but we need diverse renewable energies, and nuclear can provide quite a bit towards that goal. So dismissing it or villainizing it, unfortunately, is just not a valid strategy. It's not something that will get us to where we need to be in terms of renewable energy and carbon emissions. Um, and so, as I talked with Sebastian, and in keeping with the theme, the overall theme of this COP, the conversation inevitably turned over to finance. And something that I personally had no knowledge about at all was of how the oil prices are tied to the value of the U.S. dollar, which is some economic stuff that is far over my pay grade. So something I very much need to research more. But it's interesting to see how the price of oil, the price of gasoline here in America has skyrocketed, but worldwide is likely to keep increasing as it kind of drifts away from the value of the U.S. dollar. And I can't speak too educatedly on this, but it is very interesting to see how the price of oil is likely to rise and just simply not be an affordable option. Whereas with nuclear, of course, there's a lot of costs to start up. There's a lot of upfront things, but the energy overall is just going to be a cheaper, more affordable, more clean option for our energy. So that is some very, very interesting stuff, and hopefully we'll get that interview up in its entirety soon. Um, but to shift gears from a few days ago when Sebastian and I talked, as Rock said earlier, today was themed around human development, children and youth, and things like that. And there was quite a bit going on about eco literacy, which is a fascinating subject, and a lot just centering around youth voices. And so, one example of that as a university student, I benefited a lot from, was a youth networking event hosted by the U.S. Center, the U.S. Pavilion. And it was a wonderful event. We had a bunch of people from the U.S. From the U.S. government who are involved with climate things in one way or another, who got to speak about their careers in climate with the government and communications and things like that. And then there was just ample time for us to network with one another, to talk about our career goals, what we've done so far, how we got to COP, and all of that stuff. And so it was a very much young person focused event that allowed for quite a few connections to be made. I personally exchanged LinkedIn's with a bunch of people, which is not something I've done before, but that's the thing to do at a conference like this. And it was a well structured way for young people to connect with each other. And the whole concept of people connecting with each other is such a huge part of the value of these conferences, is that people can meet with one another, form connections, and go from there for research and for activism and for all of these different things. A huge amount of value comes from these conferences, allowing essentially the whole global community that is concerned with climate to come together and meet one another. And that event was just one example of many. Um, but on a slightly less positive note, on a positive note, there were a lot more things involving youth today, but not all of them were as positive as that. I personally attended another panel that had a few youth climate negotiators come and speak, who are some very kind people, very well spoken. But I tried to talk to them as a sort of interview light afterwards, and tried to ask about what their real involvement was with the negotiation process, what things they'd accomplished, what tasks they were up to. And unfortunately, it was very difficult to get a straight answer. And the unfortunate case of for a lot of people in these positions is that they kind of it's very common to use these positions for personal growth, and often it is those same people that are in these like youth positions that just continue with the UN, which is an honorable career path to have, but not necessarily one that is contributing to real change, not necessarily one that is allowing you to really develop and use your skills for the better of the climate and of the world. And so it's interesting to see how youth voices are very much present at this conference. That is something I was not expecting, at least not on the numbers that I've seen. But quite a few youth are here, a lot of people in the college age range. And it is really wonderful to see. But unfortunately, not everyone is here contributing equally, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. I mean, I know I personally have met a million scientists and grad students who are infinitely smarter than I am, who are conducting research at this conference. And it's wonderful to be able to meet them, to hear about their work, and to see that they are sharing their research with the world. Just today, I met a grad student who is studying precision agriculture. And he's just a few years older than me, and he's speaking at a panel tomorrow. And I told him I'd attend, and he asked me if I spoke French, and I said no, and I guess I won't be attending that panel because it will not be conducted in English. I'm a silly monolingual American. I don't speak French, but it was so cool to see someone who is essentially as old as I am, who is already deeply involved with science that is going to help the climate crisis so much, and someone that gets to share that research with the United Nations. That's huge that people in our age range get to do this. But at the same time, there are people in our age range who are given bigger platforms, given more of a voice, and aren't really able or choose not to contribute as much to the conversation. So it's definitely a mixed bag here at COP29. But again, it is wonderful to see so many young people that are here, that are expressing themselves, and that are participating in this process. With that, I'll turn it back over to Rock.
All right, thank you, Matthew. That was a good good talk there. Okay, so next, actually, I'm going to introduce our very own Michael Fiddler, who will showcase what it's like to actually be over at COP in pictures.
Thank you for the floor, and just let me share my screen. I hope you see the first image of the day. Is that so? Okay, so let me get started. This is the first image of the day, and as the week 2 of COP29 started, there is a bunch of new people who just arrived because not all participants are attending for both weeks just as we are. So many people just arrived for the first week and they departed this weekend, and a new group of people came for this week, and they'll be spending the next 5-6 days here. So there was many photos, group photos taken together as new groups of new delegations arrived. So this would be a delegation from Somalia. They were just getting together to have their group image taken. It was the first day of the second week, so I could say I could even see that there were simply more people than on Saturday. These are the informational booths, and there was some traffic there. Now, as I walked towards some of the meeting rooms, I saw this protest. I mean, there were a few more protests today, but this is the one I have seen for the first time. So it was anti-nuclear protest, and that's very interesting to watch that there are both groups, the pro nuclear and anti-nuclear. There were some presentations today that how we need to triple the nuclear power production, while these folks were standing right in front of these meeting rooms, making their protests there. I am here. I would consider myself as an independent photographer, so I'm not going to comment whether I am pro or anti. I'll just took some images there. Then I walked towards the plenaries, and it was pretty crowded, so I knew something was going to happen. And so here is the first image from the plenary. But then I walked to a slightly different angle, and I took this panoramatic image. So this should give you the scale of the room. It's really huge. There could be hundreds of people there. So at this image, you see how huge that space is. Now, I did not really know where to sit, so I just walked around, and then I noticed there are in addition to the national delegations from various countries, there are other delegations, and you can see here all the abbreviations: CCCCC, CDB, CDRA, CEB, and so on. There are simply way too many of them. I don't even know what these abbreviations means. And since we are here as a CCC, I was sitting for a while at the CCCC's desk, but then I realized this is not really the spot for me because I would have to sit there for the next two hours or so. So I just took a few images and went elsewhere. I mean, I went to the area where the photographers and the camera operators gather, where from are taken the images and the live feed for YouTube, where you can actually watch what's happening at plenary at that very moment. It is sort of a platform, so you get a little higher than the other participants, so you have a better view, and that's the spot where simply the photographers are. There was a sign which says the meeting will start shortly. So we waited for maybe 15, 20 minutes. Some of the photographers were also already just trying to catch a break because it's exhausting to just run around and go to these very 20 plus meeting rooms and plenaries and just take images all the time. I can see that some of the photographers are already exhausted. So when I waited on the platform, I took few images just to get a sense or show you how the plenary looked like. This would be just some conversation among some of the participants there. And then finally, maybe after 20 minutes, the politician showed up, so the photographers got ready, and then the show started. This is the board that everybody was waiting for. Most probably the most important person is on the left. That's the COP president, Babayev. So I took few images there and was ready to start listening, but I just did not really understand much what they were talking about, because you can see in the top right corner what was the agenda. Those were just, we will discuss paragraph 11 of this item, and then we will discuss subparagraph 2C of different agenda. So I listened to it for a few minutes, but as an outsider, I just could not really get it. So I took my images and then left the main plenary. I walked right next to the next plenary, and it was almost empty, but there was some UN security, and they told me, yeah, there is a meeting in progress. I walked in, and at first I realized how empty it was, and then I realized that there was this youth-led climate forum taking place. Comparing to the first plenary, there were many security guys. They did not allow me to walk any closer, but here nobody really cared. So I could walk all the way to the podium and just take as many images as I wanted, and nobody was telling me that I'm not supposed to be there and was trying. I simply could just stay there and take as many images as I wanted. Well, there were, I would say, maybe 50, maybe 80 participants. So I just look over the shoulder and I looked what they were doing on their computers. So this gentleman, I think he was from Ghana, he was just generating some text through GPT, and it was very powerful. His text was coming up really quickly. So it's an active use of GPT, chat GPT. Then I noticed in the middle of all the panelists, at first I simply overlooked her, but there was this girl. She's in the middle of the picture, or you can see her zoomed in the top left corner. And I did not really know at first who she was. And then I realized she was actually the moderator of this youth-led climate forum. So her name is Selena Marvaha. And I Googled her, and she's from India, and she's the youngest ever speaker at COP. She spoke at COP28 last year when she was 9. So at her age of 10, this year, she was already a moderator of one of the forum in one of the plenaries. So that's a really good career ahead of her. Unfortunately, there were no official photographers when the panelists gathered for the end of the day image. So they were very happy that I came there, and I was the only photographer with a real camera there. So they gave me a lot of smile, and they were happy that I took their images as well. But again, you can see in the middle the Selena, the 10-year-old girl who was the moderator of this session. And she was not the only kid I have seen today. When I walk by through the corridors, I also see these Saudi Arabians. That was the kid, and he was providing, or they were setting up for some interview. So you can see on one of the camera, the crew members, that he was basically telling the kid, "Don't worry, you'll be fine. It's if it doesn't go well, we can shoot it again. So stay calm. We'll see how that goes." So he really thought that this probably 10-year-old kid was just nervous and was not going to make it wouldn't be very successful at this interview. But then the interview started and the kid talked, and at first I thought he was a robot because he talked for 2-3 minutes straight using very technical terms. I had difficulties to understand what he was talking about, and he simply talked really like a robot. Obviously, he was very much prepared by his father, who's on the right hand side. But I was so surprised, and so was the film crew or the crew who was shooting the interview. They were amazed. I was amazed as well. Then I kept going and I saw another interview. And at first I noticed the girl in the middle and I thought it was also another kid.
Michael, hello. We're back.
I think we lost the connection for a second.
Yeah,
So let me go back. Let me just go back few images back.
Mhm.
Okay, I think the last one what I saw when I was talking about these Saudi Arabians, when the kid was doing uh, his interview and he sounded so
Mhm.
mature. I could not really. He simply sounded like a robot. It was so surprising. Now there was also this Colombian kid doing his interview, and then I moved to the youth pavilion. There was not too much traffic there, or the presentation seemed kind of empty to me. There were only few participants. I simply thought that it was not as crowded as I would have expected. Then I also met there Selina Marvaha, the youngest ever speaker at COP, and most likely the youngest ever moderator of any COP sessions. So the Indian girl was there, and we had a little chat, and she was very nice. And I mean, she's 10 years old, so we just had a very little chat. But that's if it's youth and children, then the youth and children have to be at COP. And one more session related to youth was this in one of the meeting rooms, and I realized for the first time that it was the panelists did not really sit up front, but they just formed a circle that all the people sat together and discussed issues there. So that's the first time that I've seen something like that in one of the official meetings or official sessions. Now, at the end of the day, I walk towards the negotiations rooms. Like I mentioned previously, if you need a place where you get frustrated because the progress is so slow, and want to relax a bit because the progress is so slow, it's the negotiations rooms. I spent there today maybe 1 hour again, and I measure it on my watch. They were discussing paragraph 18 of some preamble of whatever document, and they were discussing whether the wording should be invites or encourages, invite parties to submit or include. So they were discussing for more than 20 minutes what should be the wording. That's on one hand, it's so interesting to realize that every single word that appears in one of the official documents is so well discussed. On the other hand, it's so frustrating to watch it that it takes so long to agree on a single sentence. Once again, just to discuss these, whether to use the formulation invite or encourage, and submit or include, took over 20 minutes. And one last topic I would like to cover today are the volunteers, because it's the Youth Day. I also thought that it might be interesting to look at the volunteers, because those are young, very young people as well, mostly university students, and there are many of them here. So I talked to few of them. We had a little chat, and I was just asking a few questions, and they were very happy that somebody talked to them, and not just asking them how to get to room 3A and how to get to meeting room 7, simply that somebody showed an interest. So let me just share a few interesting facts. To become a volunteer at COP, it was highly competitive. There were more than 16,000 applicants for about 2,000 positions. So roughly 1 out of 8 or 1 out of 10 applicants was actually selected. 90% of them are university students. Their professors don't really care that much whether they are at COP or at the university, as long as the students take the online lesson. So most of them come there for the morning, say from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's the morning shift, and the afternoon shift is from roughly 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. The volunteers are really not paid at all for serving there for 2 or even 3 weeks. So I'll say roughly 6 hours a day. So they really just get the free T-shirt and free clothes and maybe free lunch there. I asked what was their motivation, and it was actually twofold. It was that they get in touch with so many foreigners from different countries, which is not very typical in Azerbaijan, and also that this experience will look very well in their CVs. So the bottom line is it was very competitive to get a position here, and to secure the position and become a volunteer, they had to go through several interviews. They also had to attend some workshops, and only those who were really active in these workshops then secure the position of a volunteer. But that's the look at the volunteers at COP, because I think they also deserve award and be mentioned here in one of our streams, because they are youth and they are, in my opinion, they are doing a very, very good job here. And this would be the last image of the day when I was just leaving COP, and I also took an image at night. And with this being said, I'm turning it back to you.
Wonderful. I think that the volunteers definitely deserve a shout out. They have been helpful in many, many different ways, especially given how annoyingly unorganized a lot of the conference has been, and where locations of certain pavilions, or even getting access to a $10 coffee. Who would have thunk? Anyway, thank you everyone for tuning into our daily COP briefing by Campus Climate Corps. And just a reminder, we're basically hosting these events from now up until Friday. We're covering all of the basics in and outs of the COP events taking place over here in Baku, Azerbaijan. We encourage you to join us tomorrow, Wednesday, and the rest of the week. And don't forget to follow our social media as well. For Instagram, that's campus.climatecore. For YouTube, it's just Campus Climate Corps. Anyway, we'll catch you all tomorrow then. So until then, take care, and we'll